I am professional wrestler Chris Rex, and if you're hearing my voice, that means you're listening to the Bear of Texas podcast. I am Chris Carpenter, better known as Chris Rex, and for the last 9 years I have been traveling up and down the roads as an independent professional wrestler. I have had the opportunity to train, work with, and share locker rooms with some of the best to ever step foot inside the squared circle. My co-host is Alex Alcazaz, aka the Bear of Texas. A journalist born outside of Lyon, France, he moved to the United States at the age of 4, and his love of sports is what led him to become a sports writer. And with 7 years under his belt already, the sky is the limit for this young Texan. Together, we mix my knowledge and professional experience with his research and sports journalism to bring you a unique view on Vice TV's hit series, Dark Side of the Ring. This is Dark Side of the Podcast.
When you think of tag teams, one of, if not the greatest tag teams in pro wrestling history are the Road Warriors, the Legion of Doom, Animal, and Hawk. They were adored worldwide and were often imitated, but personal demons lead to the split of the former 15-time tag team champions. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Alex Alcazaz, aka the Bear of Texas, and I am here with Chris Rex, and today we cover the last ride of the Road Warriors. Chris, the ride once again simply intensified.
Yeah, that's funny that they say this is the last ride of the Road Warriors, because it's been a hell of a ride as a season for Dark Side of the Ring. I've been loving this show since the first season, and I'm glad now that for this second season, me and you have been able to do this podcast based on it.
Oh, indeed, and at this point, the ride is so intense that the best way to describe it is simply like this. What a rush!
I love it. I mean, rest in peace to Michael Hegstrand, a.k.a. Hawk. Man, this was an episode I looked forward to because I personally was a LOD Road Warriors fan growing up. I loved the face paint and the spikes, and they were just so badass. I remember being a kid and just going back and watching old videotapes I had in my house, popping them in a VCR, and just watching really old wrestling. And Legion of Doom were one of the teams that, like, as a kid, they totally fit. You know, they definitely were a merchandise seller.
I mean, the best way to describe their character, I mean, one important thing, folks, is they're the first wrestlers to actually bring a movie theme to wrestling. That is actually pretty freaking cool.
Yeah, but it was definitely before its time, and like you said in our nice little introduction, that they were often imitated. You know, a lot of teams, copied the things that they do, the moves that they did, or the face paint and the actual Road Warriors gimmick. It's been ripped off how many times. So they would fit. I mean, 15-time tag team champions, Alex, all over the globe, 15 times. I mean, everywhere from New Japan to WWF, WWE, WCW, NWA. Mid-Atlantic. I mean, it's everywhere.
I mean, the bottom line is, folks, they succeeded wherever they went. They drew large crowds. They were it.
There was one team that I would say can come close to them, and that's the Dudley Boys. And I'm not sure if this has ever happened on the Indies or in ECW. I might have to do some research, but I don't think I've heard of Road Warriors versus Dudleys. I think that's a dream match.
Oh, that's definitely a dream match. And it's amazing. I mean, their characters. I mean, the idea for everything, and we'll get to that soon. Is like it's based off the movie by Mad Max called The Road Warriors, and I like how these creation of characters are based on things we've seen. Like you want to bring it to life. Like you want to give wrestling fans who are a fan of those movies something to relive. That's the art of creating characters, and the characters of the Road Warriors. Folks, it's indescribable because I can't just say it's unique because it's more than unique. I mean, it's something we've never seen before.
It's something memorable, Alex.
Memorable, and we'll never see it again.
No, ever.
No one will ever have their charisma, their popularity. I mean, it's just we'll never see it again. And rest in peace, Hawk. I only wish. I mean, if I had been a kid watching them, I would have told my parents for Halloween, I want to be the Road Warriors. And I probably would have been. My parents would have said no because they don't want me to put on a mohawk.
Well, let's discuss the origins of the Road Warriors.
Well,
all right. So, on the episode, they talk about how they were friends when they were 18. They met when they were 18 in Minneapolis, is where they're from. And Hawk was kind of known as, as a badass as a kid. You know, he was known for getting kicked out of schools, fighting, and going to the next school, beating up the biggest kid and the baddest kid in that school, and then going to another school. I mean, he had a nice little reputation on him.
He was kind of described a bully to the bullies.
Yeah.
Because, his brother said, if you were friends with him, he would take care of you. He was a good friend to everybody. Just whatever you do, don't piss him off.
So the way Animal and Hawk met is Animal was working out in the gym one day. And they were in Jesse Ventura's gym in Minneapolis. And Hawk comes over while he's on the bench press and just slaps Animal, like chops him on the chest and tells him that he should be lifting more weight because he's bigger. And that's how they became friends. And that's just weird to me. I mean, I guess it's the little things like that make people friends. But what a way to meet somebody.
It's amazing because Animal said he was bench pressing like over 300 pounds.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, in a gym run by, a wrestler, Jesse the Body Ventura. And Animal was 18, he was just a young guy. And and what we learned is, neither of those guys thought that wrestling was in their future. They never even thought about it. Although Hawk said in an interview he liked wrestling as a kid, but he never anticipated him ever going into the industry.
Never thought of doing it as a career or a profession. But he came out of Minneapolis, and if you think about the wrestlers that came out of Minneapolis, I mean, it's a who's who. So apparently, one of the things he would do around this time is to get himself, I guess, to condition himself for fights. He'd punch himself in the face.
Exactly, because, like you said, he was a badass, and he wanted to, he was toughening himself out, because he felt that was the only way to do it.
Yeah, and to talk about the talent, besides the Road Warriors that came out of Minneapolis, we had Barry Darsow, who went on to be part of Demolition, and he was also the Repo Man. We have Scott Norton, who, if you've ever watched his Japanese matches from back in the day, I mean, he was a badass dude.
He was also in WCW, I believe.
Yes, he was in part of the NWO. Rick Rude. Rude. Man, talk about GOAT. That's Rick Rude right there, man.
Mr. Perfect as well.
Yeah, and
Lewis was on Vern Gagne, of course.
That Minneapolis, I don't know what they have in that water, man.
I mean, Minneapolis, I like to personally nickname it the wrestling state because, wrestling is just so popular. But not just, to amateur wrestling to professional wrestling, a lot of tough guys come from the state of Minnesota.
Yeah, it does. So why don't you tell us the story of how they got the thought of being wrestlers in their head?
I would be happy. Well, they were bouncers in a bar that was in a really tough neighborhood. Now, this bar was dangerous. It was called Grandma B's. They were bouncers, and as we'll get to, I'll describe something that Barry Darsow explained how things were going. But there was something shady also. I mean, as tough as the bar was, something about the owner. And the owner was a coke dealer. And since Hawk and Animal were his two best guys, he would go to them and say, "Hey guys, this guy owes me money. I need you guys to go have a conversation with him." And since they work for him, and I'm sure they were paid well to do it, they did what he was told. And then we come to a point. There's this scene, how they're like doing this. I mean, I'm not trying to describe what they were doing, but the way they're kind of like doing this scene, how it went. They're on a bridge, and Animal and Hawk are threatening to throw this guy off the bridge, and they're saying, "You better pay up, buddy."
Yeah, that's Animal pretty much told that story where they had him over the bridge and threatened him. I'm sure he paid up after that.
Oh,
But
I hope so. For his sake, I hope so.
I mean, they were asked no questions. Okay, this is what I'm going to do. This I'm getting paid to do. That this is what I have to do. He owes my boss money.
Hmm.
My boss is going to get paid.
Hmm. So anyway, and then now we get to a point now where Barry Darsow, as Chris explained, he was part of one of the coolest tag teams. Also, Demolition. He was known as Smash. He was also known as the Repo Man. A later point of his career, he was also a bouncer. And he explained that there was a happy hour at a certain time of the bar where they would do things like wet t-shirt contests, yada yada yada. I mean, it's one of those bars. One day, I guess a brawl came out or a bar fight broke out, and then Animal, and he explains the Animal just picked up this guy and threw him out, and the guy who he threw him out was a guy named Ole Anderson. We'll get to that there. But anyway, knowing how tough they were, there was a bartender in that bar named Eddie Sharkey, who was a longtime wrestler who wrestled for the AWA, which is, I believe, another promotion that was based in Minneapolis. I think it was run by Vern Gagne.
Well, Animal threw the guy out the bar, and he landed on Ole Anderson's shoes. He didn't throw Ole Anderson out the bar.
Yeah.
I don't think that was
Okay. I might have gotten it mixed up, but anyway, Animal picks up this guy, throws him, and the guy lands, in front of Ole Anderson. But Eddie Sharkey, who was the bartender, who was a former wrestler, goes up to him and says, "Well, I'm going to start a wrestling school. I want you to come train." And at first, he says that to Animal, to Hawk, and to Darsow, and they're all like, how should I say? They're a little skeptical because they're all like, I don't know. I never really anticipated this. And he says, "No, guys, you guys are going to make it." So he has a church, and then they explain that in the church's basement he had a boxing ring, and he would invite a lot of guys, and they would train. But the wrestling training was kind of... I'm not sure if that's how wrestling training goes. He would just sit in the chair. He would just come and the guy say, "Hey, good drop kick. Good job, and that."
It kind of reminds me of with the way they described it. It reminded me of how Dr. D. Dave Schultz was trained. How it was kind of like they taught him, but they didn't teach him to work punches or anything.
No.
So it was kind of like they wanted to see what they could do before they opened up and told them what the business was. So it kind of seemed like the same roots.
Exactly. So the training goes well, and then now we get to the night where the patron that was thrown out of the bar. So like you said, Animal throws him out and ran at Ole Anderson's shoes, and then Ole Anderson recruits them. But here's something we don't know: those two guys had already been wrestling before this bar incident. However, how Animal explained is those guys he would wrestle like in Georgia, but he would wrestle like 9 times a week. And he didn't even make $200. And then he would explain, me working the bar, I made a whole lot more. But also Hawk was wrestling in Canada and not making anything. So Ole Anderson sees them and he recruits them. He says, "You guys are going to work in a big territory in Georgia." He says, "Be in Atlanta this time." And that's where it changes, because Georgia Championship Wrestling was not like most of the promotions were doing at the time. I mean, they were doing great.
Yeah, it was definitely one of the top territories. And when he told Animal to show up in Atlanta, Animal showed up in Atlanta, and he was dressed as Animal described. And how, if you've seen a picture of it, a member of the Village People, he had the policeman biker hat, and he had these jeans that they were cut up to his, they're really short jeans, like he definitely looked like a member of the Village People. And it's just so funny seeing footage of that. Like, that was the first gimmick, and he was actually the Road Warrior.
Mm-hmm. And this is how it was, and this is the experience that was bad, because he was wrestling 9 times a week, but like that. But then they go back to the bar, and then Ole Anderson is shown a picture, and then he gets Animal confused for Hawk, and then Eddie Sharkey, who shows the picture, says, "No, that's not Animal, that's Hawk." And then Ole Anderson says, "Wait a minute, there's 2 of these guys?" He's like, "Well, tell you what, we're gonna assemble a tag team," and then they're sent to Atlanta, and that's where the career really kicks off. Now, as I mentioned already, now they're known as the Road Warriors, and the character is inspired based on the movie Road Warriors by Mad Max. I'm ashamed to say I've never seen it, but after seeing this episode, It's definitely on my list. And I also mentioned they're the first wrestlers to bring a movie theme to wrestling, which was great because that really changed wrestling. That changed wrestling's history forever. Now, Ole Anderson. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to explain that when they debuted as a tag team, they were actually handed the tag belts.
Mm-hmm. And the character too, like they had biker gear. Like the way I looked at them, it's kind of like they were bikers. I mean, bikers, and then they were told that they won the belts in Chicago.
Yeah, just tell everyone that you won the belts in a tournament in Chicago. See, that's the old wrestling thing, like fans didn't know at that time. So you could tell them pretty much anything, kind of like the Intercontinental belt was running Rio de Janeiro, right?
Yeah, with Pat Patterson. Yeah, he beat supposedly, quote, beat Ted DiBiase. And, I mean, sometimes I don't know how they come up with these, but you know what? It's how they do business, so it doesn't matter. I
mean, it's you gotta explain it somehow, right?
I mean, if they just come up with this idea, you know what? You came from another promotion, you took the belt with you, and you're officially the champion. That's how I guess that's how they look
Pretty
at
much.
it. So Ole Anderson comes up to a guy by the name of Paul Ellering, and Paul Ellering, just like Animal and Hawk, he's also from Minnesota. So Ole Anderson says, "These boys are yours. Take care of them." That's where things just got even better because that's where the change of the characters really took a great turn. I mean, that's when the war paint came to mind, the mohawks, the pads,
Yeah,
the idea for like post-apocalyptic characters.
The three of them together were able to create that magic, to create that theme, that character, those characters. They say two heads are better than one, and three heads are better than two, man. And they were all on the same page. They seen what they wanted, and they were always working. They told us there was a story that Animal told where they would sit in Denny's and just come up with everything they wanted to do in the matches and draw out on napkins what they wanted to do in matches. And Paul Ellering would do it too and say, "Oh, you're over here," and have Hawk come off of this way. And so, I mean, when you really put the work into it, it's going to show. And it reminded me of like sometimes how some of the things that I come up with or that the people I ride with on the road come up with, like it's right there in the car. We'll talk to each other and be like, "Oh, what if you did this?" Oh, and then you came up with it. And you know what? I'm going to try that out tonight, So it kind of, that's really how it works. Like I know some people may be like, "Oh, they're just telling me stories for TV." No. Like sometimes we just come up with it sitting at a Waffle House, sitting in the hotel room or just you're on a highway and you got nothing to do but talk,
Mm-hmm. And the pads, I always found that so cool. The shoulder pads with the spikes. The Animal says he had a friend who helped him with that. Like Animal said he took a couple of old shoulder pads he had in his garage, he poked holes in them and told his friend, "Let's do this. This is for my wrestling character. I think that would be cool." That
was also part of the appeal. It was something you never seen before. Like what, football shoulder pads with fucking spikes on them? Mm-hmm. That's badass. They had the war paint, the mohawks. How the idea of the mohawks, how Hawk would have two small cuts, and Animal would have just the side shaved. So when they put their heads together, it looks like one set of one head.
Mm-hmm. It's just unbelievable. I mean, the early years.
I never knew that about them.
It's just unbelievable. I mean, their first few years, from 1983 to 84 to 86, they were, Georgia Championship Wrestling. They were also in AWA, as we mentioned, that's up in Minnesota. Things went well there, but it wasn't until they went to Japan, that's where the popularity just just kicked the roof off kicked the roof off.
Yeah, the Japanese fans ate the characters up, and they were known for working a little stiff and working a little harder, so I'm sure they definitely fit out in Japan.
And it's amazing because there was a wrestler in there named who was really popular named Killer Khan. An Animal picks him up, press slams him. That had never ever seen before because Killer Khan was known as the monstrous heel that nobody could take down. And the Road Warriors come in there. And Killer Khan wrestles with another dude. I believe the other guy he wrestled with was Animal Hamaguchi or something like that. I did a little bit of research they squashed him in under 4 minutes. The Japanese people were so blown away that Animal pressing Killer Khan actually made national news in Japan.
Yeah, that was unheard of, doing things like that. And it's kind of like Hulk Hogan slamming Andre at WrestleMania 3. It was the biggest thing ever, but this was kind of bigger because it didn't just make wrestling news. It wasn't just wrestling history. It was like Japanese history. It was that big.
And now, that's when they're officially on top of the world. A very successful tenure in Japan. And then eventually...
also, during their time in Japan, that's where Hulk started kind of getting into it with the Japanese mafia. And
Yes.
Animal was the type of guy to just, get some dinner, sleep, work out, and repeat. Hulk kind of wanted that party lifestyle, and he always wanted to be out, and it started to wear and tear on the tag team.
Exactly, because, you see, folks, we said this before and many times, the life of a wrestler, all the beatings you gotta take, the hard traveling, I mean, you want to live the party lifestyle, because, they were on top of the world, so obviously Hawk felt, you know what, I'm on top of the world, I should party. But I like how Animal did things. I mean, you do the shows, grab a bite to eat, go to sleep, so you can train the next morning. That's the way. That's the safe way. But at the end of the day, I mean, I can't really throw Hawk under the table because I don't know what it's like to be in his shoes. I mean, I don't know what it's like to live that life. But like you explained, is Hawk and Animal, while they were great together, I mean, their lives were kind of run in a different way. And and it's normal because we don't know what always goes in the minds of a wrestler. And it's just amazing. He was partying with the Japanese Yakuza. I mean, that's pretty. I don't know if I should say that's pretty cool or.
It's definitely something, but again, oftentimes with tag teams, you could have the greatest tag team. You're going to have your fights, you're going to have your problems. There's going to be things that you start to not like about that person, but all in all, you still go out there and do your job. And that's something, and that's what part of the reason they were able to go for so long is they were oftentimes able to put personal differences aside and just, let's go out there and be what we are. And that's one of the greatest and most top, the top attraction tag team in the world, especially during this time. And their goal was to just be the biggest tag team and make money, all three of them. And they never had to change their gimmick. They were just badasses, whether they were faces or heels. They never really had to change themselves. And that's what's unique about them.
See, and also a thing that's unique is when I mentioned that they changed the course of wrestling history, they also specifically changed it in the category of tag team wrestling. Because tag team wrestling is an art. And they just made tag team wrestling just so much more enjoyable than the singles competition. They were kind of saying, you know what, tag team wrestling is cool too. We'll make it look cool. I mean,
and they did.
And they did. I mean,
they changed the whole element of tag team wrestling.
I mean, their finishing move, man, it's just so cool. The Doomsday Device.
And what an awesome name for it, right?
Exactly. And let explain how the move goes, folks. The Doomsday Device. Animal will put his opponent on his shoulder, just like a father carrying his son. Those carnivals. I know what I'm talking about. Hawk would get on the rope and then clothesline the opponent while Animal would throw him down. Would slam him on his back at the same time. That's the unique art of tag team that they changed. Two wrestlers working together the whole time, winning the victory as a team. That's tag teaming for you.
They also participated in the first scaffold match, which I actually want to go back. Maybe I'll watch it tonight. With the Midnight Express in the NWA.
Yes.
The first ever scaffold match, and a few days before the match, Hulk broke a bone in his foot and worked the whole match in a boot, that they put on in the protective boot, and he went through the whole match. I mean, that goes to show how tough these guys were.
Exactly, but if they felt like, what, as long as I'm breathing, whatever, then I'm gonna do the match. But yes, they arrive at Jim Crockett Promotions, or back then, which turned out to be WCW. I mean, if I'm like Jim Crockett Promotions and the NWA were stuck together eventually, and that's what became WCW. So anyway, so they arrive. This is in 1980s, in the mid to late 80s. They arrive at Jim Crockett Promotions, and they immediately go into a feud with the Koloffs. One of them, Nikita Koloff, forgot his real name. He was also part of this documentary. He says, he was I was an anti-American Russian, but I'm not really Russian. And that was their first main feud against the Koloffs. It was at the Great American Bash of 1986, where they had a Russian chain match against them. And that's where I think that's where their first babyface turn took place, because during the match, the crowd started chanting USA, USA, because they're two warriors beating up on two Russians who hate America. So that got them over as faces.
It definitely did, and also during that time, it was I don't know if the casual fan would understand this, but back in those times, there was no YouTube. There was none of that. The Great American Bash was actually a tour. Mm-hmm. It was a whole tour. Pretty much, it was set up just like any band. It was set up a tour, and these guys will wrestle. All across the country. They would do these matches. So I just wanted to express the toughness between both of these tag teams in these matches, because they did these Russian chain matches everywhere on that tour.
Exactly.
So think about it, night after night after night, you're doing these chain matches, and I mean that's kind of brutal, man. I kind of want to always do something like that, where it's you do a month tour, you go to every different state, and you work the same guy, in every state,
Mm-hmm. So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that's kind of lost in wrestling right now.
It is, and one of our listeners wanted me to explain why there were so many anti-American Russians during that time. Well, obviously it's simple, because during that time it was the Cold War, so having a bad guy who was a Russian who hates America, it makes sense. But what really, I guess, what really the question is, why would they have an American do that? And I'm like, well, some guys are just willing to do what they're doing because they want to be a heel, and then they're given this idea, and then they go with it. So I'm guessing that was just it. But the whole idea was these kind of I call it these little political storylines like that. I mean, it has to kind of make sense. If you're gonna be an anti-American, it's gotta be something that's you gotta mix it up with real history, who's had tensions with the United States. So these anti-American Russians were just kind of a thing to kind of give the fans,
All in all,
yeah.
Our jobs as wrestlers are to tell stories.
Yeah.
And good versus evil. I will always say that's at the core. That is every story, every movie, every television show, every book, every it's good versus evil.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the biggest story you can tell. So, and especially if it's up with the times, we often talk about, Sergeant Slaughter, when in his gimmick, when he started becoming an Iraqi
sympathizer, yeah.
So I mean, if it's with the time, of course, people are going to get behind it. It's a good story to tell.
Exactly.
We're the good guys, they're evil.
But to go ahead and steal my explanation, the Koloffs, I don't know much about how wrestling. I didn't watch it back then. The Koloffs were a heel tag team. They were way over. They were pushed. They were known as unstoppable anti-American Russians. So to bring in the Road Warriors and then finally beat them, it was kind of it's like Kris said, to tell a story, and this is just to end the story, to end the anti-American dominance, and to basically start a new story. Basically,
it was perfect, and
yeah.
Watching this episode and a few of the other episodes, it makes me want to go back to these NWA days and watch the matches, because I want to, see. I wasn't around. I wasn't able to experience that, there live, be able to experience this feeling of what wrestling was in the 80s. And maybe that's why I'm so biased to wrestling that there is now. I prefer the faster lucha style, what people call spot monkeys and shit like that. That's my sub. And I think maybe, I wasn't around for the 80s wrestling, but hearing about the matches that these guys did, and the characters that they had, and the worldwide population. I mean, not population, but popularity that they had. I'm sorry. The worldwide popularity that they had, it's amazing. And I'm talking about the Ric Flair, the Dusty Rhodes, the Road Warriors. So, I mean, to go back and watch the 80s, I wish it was a time I could have been alive.
This is professional wrestler Chris Rex, and you're listening to the Playmakers Blog Podcast, my only destination for sports talk radio.
I mean, I said professional wrestling was really quite of a peak in the 80s, and the scaffold match that you talked about with the Midnight Express. But we saw the highlights, like how they were tangling like they were on monkey bars. They would fall probably a good 10 feet into the ring. I mean, this was actually at Starrcade of '86. I mean, Starrcade, another big major name in professional wrestling as well.
Yeah, it was just as big as WrestleMania, but Hawk's personal issues. He became dependent on muscle relaxers because of the broken bone in his foot, and of course he was drinking. Everybody was drinking about that. I was drinking around then, but it was the muscle relaxers that started getting to him, and WWF came calling. They were started to become on WWF's radar, and the smart move for them was to go to WWF.
Mm-hmm. And this is the best part, because when they went to the WWF, the momentum was so huge. Let me explain why the momentum was huge. Because during their time from '86 to '90 with Jim Crockett Promotions, they had a long bloody feud with the Four Horsemen. That's what just got things even bigger. I mean, that feud just went on for so long. They would win the NWA World Tag Team Championships, and then there was an episode of where take a second. So Jim Crockett Promotions, I mean, they were with TBS Television, which was really, really huge, and when they're in these major feuds and the ratings go well and the fans are just loving it, that momentum goes so big that WWF. That's why WWF got them at the right time, because they were so popular. So it's like WWF just basically stole them, because that's Vince. Vince is just that powerful.
I hate hearing the word stole, because they didn't. They offered them a bigger opportunity. Mm-hmm. It was the only place they hadn't gone yet.
It's just it's a stole, like from a signing, I should say. Like they signed them, and that's a steal.
I mean, that's something we can debate, man. Because I just hate when people say, "Oh, they stole them." If they stole them, like, they're not like, they can go wherever they want, pretty much. Mm-hmm. It's not like Vince put a gun to their head and said, "Hey, come to the WWF."
I think also what got them also way over as well, because they had that alliance with Dusty Rhodes and Jim Crockett Promotions. But anyways, now we get to the World Wrestling Federation. They arrived there in June of 1990. Now, before they came, and here's something I learned, because I wasn't sure, because sometimes people would say they're the Road Warriors or the Legion of Doom, so I would ask myself, which is it? Are they both? Is it one? But now we learn. So Vince calls them and says, well, guys, we already got the Ultimate Warrior, we got the modern day Warrior, who's Kerry Von Erich, we need something different. And Hawk has the great idea, and Hawk came up, says, you know what, we'll just be the Legion of Doom. And what's so interesting is, how Hawk came up with the idea to be known as the Legion of Doom? Take a guess.
He-Man.
He-Man. Well, specifically also the Super Friends, because in the Super Friends, the show, the bad guys were known as the Legion of Doom. So that's how he came up with the idea, and Vince McMahon said, that's perfect. You guys are the Legion of Doom. Now, it's just... immediately they go there, and as you mentioned, I mean, it's...
Wait, so it didn't come from He-Man, but they showed all those He-Man clips.
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, those He-Man and the Masters in the U.S., I mean, I did watch the Super Friends, but...
I'm pretty sure it did come from Super, because I'm sure that was DC Comics.
Yeah, because they might have gotten it wrong, I'm not sure, because I remember, I used to watch the Super Friends when I was a kid, and did you watch it by any chance?
Yeah, that's why I'm like when they said He-Man, I wasn't sure on that.
Yeah, exactly, because I watched it a little. I had a friend who was a huge fan of He-Man, and sometimes he would invite me over and he would show me the episodes, which I loved, but I was a big Super Friends guy, and I'm pretty sure it was from the Super Friends, because the bad guys were known as the Legion of Doom. But anyway, they arrive, and they're immediately put into a feud with none other than Demolition, because Demolition had been the hottest tag team for years during that time.
Yeah, and it seemed on paper booking, it seemed like a good fit. Like, okay, they kind of have somewhat the same gimmick, that rough and tough power and paint. So let's put them together and see what they can do.
Exactly, and part of that feud with Demolition, there was it eventually, as I'm reading, it led to a televised 6-man tag team match when they teamed up with the Ultimate Warrior, who was the WWF World Heavyweight Champion at the time. It was in a match with all 3 members of Demolition.
Oh wow. That's a match I'd want to see too.
I mean, it would make sense. I mean, 2 tough dudes, full of adrenaline, pairing, putting them in a match with the Ultimate Warrior. It makes complete sense, and honestly, the fans want to see that. Now, unfortunately, this is when things begin to get worse and worse for Hawk. Excuse me, because
yes, he would fail a drug test and have to take 3 months off.
Mm-hmm. Before that, though, what's sad is because they were getting even more over, because at SummerSlam of 1991, which was at Madison Square Garden, the Legion of Doom won the first WWF World Tag Team Championships in a no disqualification street fight against the Nasty Boys. And that's when they became the only team ever in wrestling to win tag team titles in all 3 top promotions in wrestling of the 1980s. Unfortunately, they went on to lose the titles to Money Incorporated, which, let me remind you folks, which was Ted DiBiase and a man known as IRS. Better pay your fair share, guys. Anyway, so they lose them, but they would briefly leave the promotion, and I think that's what he mentioned. He would fail a drug test and be suspended for 3 months, but also Animal mentioned that he would take time off too, because they just could not use only one of them. It just could not work that way.
Yeah, they were a tag team. He wasn't going to wrestle without Hawk or be the Road Warriors with someone else. It was going to be Hawk and Animal or none of them.
Exactly.
And that goes back to, the loyalty of the tag team, and kind of that, the bad part of being a tag team is, if one of you mess up, both of you mess up, it's kind of give and take with tag teams. It's yin and yang, it could be really good. If it's really good, both of you are really good. But if one of you are really bad, both of you are really bad.
Indeed. And now we get to the most vital part of their first WWF run. SummerSlam 1992, folks. What's really special, it was overseas. It was in London, England, at Wembley Stadium, in front of over 80,000 fans. And we learned something at this part, because Animal mentions that the original part of the plan is they were supposed to wrestle and, I believe, beat the tag team champions, who at the time were the natural disasters, Earthquake and Typhoon. Unfortunately, because of the heat, after the suspension, Hawk still was messing up, and Vince was getting more frustrated. And Animal mentions, this was building up before the event started. They were going over what they were going to do. Vince is trying to talk to him, and then Hawk is repeatedly interrupting him and saying, no, we should do this and that, and that's when Vince officially, is fine, I'm done, I can't trust him anymore. So what would have been a semi-main event match turned out to be this was like the bottom of the card. This was officially on the pay-per-view. This was not a dark match. They wrestled Money Incorporated instead. They did win, but the key to that match, Chris, is the finish of that match. You know why?
Yeah, because they couldn't.
Go ahead.
They couldn't hit the finish. They couldn't hit the Doomsday device because Hawk was going to fall off the ropes in the condition that he was in.
Mm-hmm. And watch the match, folks. You'll see that Hawk was not in the condition to wrestle. So they do the finish. Ted DiBiase, accidentally knocks over IRS, and then Animal does this power slam. They win, and that's it. Now things have really blown up, because Animal says immediately after that he flew back to the United States with Paul Ellering. They went to Hershey, Pennsylvania to do some taping, and Hawk was not there. Hawk went AWOL in London after the event, and he missed his flight back to the United States. And then we learn that Hawk calls Vince McMahon and says, I quit. I don't want to be here anymore. And that's when the Road Warriors, the whole Legion of Doom thingy, just the vase broke and shattered. Because that's where all that momentum, everything they had just sunk.
Yeah, and Hawk decided not to come back to WWE, which again left Animal with no partner and really with no work. Because how can you do, singles matches, And for the taping, I believe he had to do a handicap match, a 2-on-1 match, I believe.
Mm-hmm. And he got injured. He herniated a couple of discs. I mean, like I said, the whole thing just fell down and broke. I mean, Animal does this show, he gets hurt, and then...
Well, Animal's still willing to fix things because, him and Ellering called Hawk to say, hey, why don't we just finish out our commitment to Vince? Let's be good businessmen and finish out our dates. And Hawk didn't want to do it, and he had no desire to do it. So what he did was get a separate deal in Japan and formed a tag team with Kensuke Sasuke as the Power Warrior, and they called themselves the Hellraisers, which was an obvious ripoff of the Road Warriors, and that did not make Animal happy at all. He was pissed off.
He was pissed off. I mean, he felt betrayed. That's our character, because he said, that's our character. What are you doing, bro? And I think what really hurt Animal is that he was not told this. Like, Hawk just did it like that. It's shocking. I mean, I really want to ask myself, I wonder how Vince felt about that. But since those, I mean, I'm sure since Hawk and Animal had the marketing, had the trademarks, I mean, Vince probably couldn't do anything about it. But anyway, as you mentioned, Hawk goes to Japan, while, Animal, I'm not sure exactly, Animal, I guess was injured, but Animal did actually ended up joining the duo in 1996 in Japan, and then they were once again known as the Road Warriors, and interesting this part is their theme music was Iron Man.
Well, that was their theme music in NWA, that was their theme music. That was before the whole copyright thing, and they didn't play it on TV. So, that was their theme music, though. On indie shows, that was their theme music. And ECW, that was their theme music.
Mm-hmm. Now, when we get to 1996, they go back to WCW. Now, that's when Animal, his back had finally healed enough, he was able to wrestle again. So they arrive there, and what I'm reading, they start the feud with the Steiner brothers. They had a feud also with Harlem Heat, and also with Sting and Lex Luger, who were the tag team champions. They would challenge for the title several times, but they would not win. But this return to WCW was only brief because they were only there, for 6 months, and the reason why they left was because of a dispute with Eric Bischoff. And want me to explain to you exactly? See, I know why this dispute took place, Chris. You want to know why?
Sure.
Because apparently Bischoff promised them huge contracts, as well as a separate contract from Japan. But I guess it didn't happen. But Bischoff himself denies this. So whatever happened is they had a fallout, and it just means they couldn't do business. So they went their separate ways. I mean, I can't take a side. I wasn't there. But the bottom line is, their return to WCW was short-lived, and honestly, based on what I've researched and how things went, it was ultimately just a rag, like a waste of time.
Yeah, and Hawk, again, had his issues. He had gotten into a really near-death experience with a head-on collision with an 18-wheeler, and he wasn't wearing a seatbelt. He also,
and his car flipped like 6 times, as Nikita Koloff explained, and he says that he just walked away from it.
Yeah, eventually he wound up contracting hepatitis C,
Mm-hmm.
and that seemed to stop him until he was cured. And then when the doctor told him, he was cured, he went and started partying again. So he really didn't take care of himself at this time.
And as Animal said, he says, and I quote, "The doctor said you're clear to do what you want, but Hawk mistook that advice for the wrong thing. The doctor should have said you're clear to return to wrestle." But Hawk, I mean, I get, but you know what? Honestly, even if he had said that, Hawk probably would have gone back to it anyway. I mean, Hawk was a party. I mean, he loved to party. What else is there to say? He loved to party, and it's, I mean, and then now they return again to the World Wrestling Federation. And by the way, I owe y'all an apology because it was important that I missed the part, like how he had that injury with the accident with the 18-wheeler, and then had the hepatitis C. But it's amazing he cured himself and potentially saving his career, but his party habits just could not go away.
Nope. And but they wound up getting another offer from the WWF.
Mm-hmm.
And this time there was a few stipulations with this. One of them was that they had to guarantee their dates, that they were going to make every date.
As it was called, Vince McMahon basically called it an insurance policy.
Yeah, 100%. And they wound up working with the WWF, and Droz winds up being the third member of the team. And they interview Droz, and he talks about how they were the icons, and he was kind of, the rookie there, and he, he understands why he was put in that position, and he loved the fact that he was able to work with these two legends.
And then it comes to the point, and then there's that angle that Hawk comes to the ring intoxicated, and he's supposed to team up with Droz, and I guess the match doesn't start, and then Droz then starts attacking him. And then they have this, and then there's that angle with the Titantron.
Yeah, well, they built this up for a while, where Hawk was starting to be drunk during the matches, and he'd come out during matches that weren't his, and what they were doing was pretty much portraying his real life on TV. And that started really hitting home with Animal, because it was pretty much what he was really going through on a daily basis, and here they are kind of glorifying it on TV, and they turned it into an angle where pretty much it wound up being revealed that Droz was the drug dealer that was selling him drugs, and but they had Hawk on top of the Titantron, and it was making it look like, Droz was trying to help him down, but he pushes him off the Titantron, and then I believe a few weeks later it was revealed that he was like the pusher man, and it was really, it was kind of in my mind, I guess, a distasteful story, especially if that's what the guy's really going through, things like that. Like, you don't portray that on TV.
You don't, no. And I feel bad for Hawk that they did this. I mean, it's hard. I mean, I know it was hard for him, dealing with what he was doing, but to humiliate him like that, to poke fun at it, and to put it into a storyline, that's just not cool. I mean, that's disrespectful. Kind of makes me want to cry, to be honest.
Yeah, and it was because of that angle they decided to leave the WWF again, and they went to go work independently in Australia. Mm-hmm. But the thing about Australia was Hawk was able to find any drugs he wanted and needed. He was on cocaine, muscle relaxers, and they found him passed out before the show one day, and they said his heart was ready to explode.
Mm-hmm. So they take him to the hospital, and then Animal says, he says, Hawk called him and said, "You got to get me out of here, dude. I don't want to be here." So Animal goes there. He checks him out of the hospital, which I should mention was against the doctor's orders. They fly out of Australia. They fly to LA, and then then they take the connecting flight. I think they go to Florida, and that's where Animal says to Hawk, "You're on your own now, dude."
Yeah, and the whole reason he wanted Animal to help him out the hospital was because he didn't want to die in Australia. He didn't want to die in another country.
So that has me ask, like, did he know that he was about to die?
No, I just think it was like, if it's that serious, I don't want to, get me the fuck out of here. I would kind of do the same thing.
All right. And now we get to the point with what's the sad part. Because on October 19, 2003, Hawk passes away.
Yeah, he had cleaned up his act. Animal went to see the Christian Power Team, which was a powerlifting team that Nikita Koloff had a part in. I'm not sure if he owned it or if it was his organization. And they brought Hawk out there, and Hawk walked to the altar, and he was baptized later that week. So, he found God, and he started cleaning up his wife, married a woman named Gail, and, really started putting his family first.
Exactly, and that's amazing. Yeah, he said he was baptized in a swimming pool.
Yeah, I mean, he wanted to change his life, and unfortunately, he was moving furniture out of his house and told his wife that he needed to lay down because he wasn't feeling good, and he died at the age of 46. His heart just stopped.
And it's sad too because he comes clean, he beats his addictions, but all those years of abuse, and when he goes through as a wrestler, the heart can't take it anymore and just stops.
I really like that Paul Ellering, for the funeral, repainted the black van that he first met the Road Warriors when he first met the Road Warriors, and he drove it down to Tampa for the funeral.
I mean, God bless Paul Ellering. I mean, and God bless Hawk. God bless all three of them. And Ellering giving the eulogy and speaking at the funeral, it's only fitting because keep in mind, those two talents, Hawk and Animal, they were put under the care of Paul Ellering because Ellering would drive him to the shows. They would always fly with him. It's like he was the guy they could come up to, and he took care of them. They took care of each other. They were a family.
Yeah, it's your brothers. You got to take care of each other. That's 100%. And Paul Ellering was, like you said, was their caretaker. He was their manager. That's the thing that people don't realize. His manager back in the day wasn't just a title. It wasn't just something you were. You legit managed whoever it was. You got them to the shows. You got them to the hotels. You made sure they were straight. You made sure they were ready to wrestle.
And that's it. Now, it wasn't really now when Hawk died, the legacy did continue. And then we get to LOD, that happened in 2005. Animal returns to the WWE, and he teams up with a wrestler named Heidenreich. And they go on to win and then at the Great American Bash of July 24, 2005, the two win the titles, but then they would lose it back again shortly. I got to ask you, Chris, when they did, Legion of Doom, here, and then without Hawk, do you think that was the right thing to do?
Not at all.
Explain why, please.
I mean, it just, Hawk had passed away. Why, it should have just been left alone, It should have, just died with Hawk. And, Animal will tell you himself he didn't like it. Those two do not have the best relationship.
No. And, for Animal, it had to be hard because he had to do something he was famous for, but he couldn't do it with the guy he did it with. And I'm sure it brought up some bad memories because, it must have been hard, all the emotions, too. But the best part of the return from WB is on April 2nd, 2011, the Road Warriors, along with Paul Ellering, were inducted into the Hall of Fame.
That's a, perfect way to end the legacy.
Perfect way to end the legacy, indeed. Chris, I really have to... Did you cry during this episode, or did you get emotional?
No, not really.
I mean, I did a little bit, but this was because of my appreciation for what these guys did in the business. They, like I mentioned, they changed the course of history. Not only for the art of tag team, but, the creation of characters, the charisma, the storylines, everything. I mean, if these guys, if this had never happened, I don't know how wrestling, if wrestling would be the same as it is today. Maybe we wouldn't have tag teams like the New Day, just to name a few. It's just unbelievable. Well, folks, before we let you go, got a couple announcements to make. Number one, I want to give a shout out to Darnell for his latest episode covering The Last Dance. Darnell has been absolutely exceptional. When you listen to him covering that, you just tell, like, Darnell takes you to school. Darnell tells it like it is. He does exactly what Kris and I are committed to do. He tells the whole truth. The whole truth, nothing but the truth, and he's absolutely excellent at it. Darnell, great job on that episode. I love it. Y'all, folks, you should listen to it too. And one more thing, I recently did an episode with my good friend Wiley, aka the Venomous Stare, and we went over the Cowboys' schedule for the 2020 season. Please, folks, listen to them. You will not be disappointed. And once again, it's my honor to do once again a great episode with Kris Rex. Kris, thank you so much for joining me. And next week, folks, is the final episode of the series. And this time, I'm probably going to cry like a baby because the episode is about Owen Hart.
Yes, next week we'll be covering the tragic death of Owen Hart, and it will be the last time we'll be covering Dark Side of the Ring episode, at least until they bring out more another season. But we will have bonus episodes out, so keep tuning in right here on Anchor, on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, wherever you listen to podcasts.
Thank you, Kris. And once again, folks, your loyalty is greatly appreciated. Y'all have a good night.